Hey guys, so fresh on the heels of my last live, which was pretty hopeless, I gotta say, but hey, it's I'm being totally real here, and some days it's hopeless, and other days I'm like, wait a minute, I saw a spark, I saw a spark. And today is one of those days. So I wanted to do a reading again, which I haven't done in a long time. And let's dive into the two timelines and how, yeah, we are splitting into two timelines, guys. It's happening and what's going to happen for each timeline. I'm just going to call for easiness sake. One timeline has to do with freedom, one timeline has to do with control, and we'll see. Both are going to play out. They're both going to play out. And but what does one mean versus the other? Those of you that are new to my channel, welcome. My name's Carlene. This is Hello Carlene, where we dive into current events with a spiritual perspective. And I offer coaching and intuition, channeling, inspiration, help in creating the life that you want to create for yourself and finding the most beautiful way forward for you, finding the opportunities that work for you. So if you haven't had a session with me yet and you're sitting at the crossroads of your life, you might want to check the description box below and sign up for a session with me. Okay, let's dive into the road that lies ahead of us and these two roads of freedom and control and what they actually mean and where we're headed with them. I haven't used my own deck of cards, so we're going to be working with my deck of cards, and I haven't used them in quite some time, so we're going to get back to that. And also with the Gustave Doré Black and White Tarot, for those of you that like to know which cards they are. So before I actually dive into the reading, I want to talk about the two pathways and the two timelines that are opening up. And the thing is that it's pretty. All of a sudden, I'm seeing dimensions. I'm seeing like the fourth dimension moving like a tesseract, and yeah. Okay, no, we're gonna stay here. I'm drifting already. But the two timelines, freedom, control, and what they actually mean. Now, in the old speak, what they used to call them would be service to self, service to other pathways and timelines. And in your point of development, everything that you're doing is service to self. So you're focusing on yourself. You've got that ego construct. Every sentence that you create comes from the I, and so on and so forth, right? Your whole perspective of being able to understand, digest, and inform reality has to do with this one significant point of focus, which is you or yourself, right? And so with it, as this consciousness grows, there comes a cross point. There comes a point where this I has to fall away in order for the consciousness to continue growing because the I becomes limiting. It becomes a limiting constriction around the emerging consciousness, and it has to break out of that and fall away. And this is kind of a cracking of the egg. It's a painful process. It's difficult, it's strenuous, it's letting go of old habits, and so on and so forth. But at some point, you step into this overarching consciousness. And so I've already explained it in my intuition classes and in my intuition development that psychic ability is no more than moving away from that point of the I and expanding your consciousness, expanding your awareness within consciousness to include more points of reference than simply I. And as you become more and more and more aware, and you're in that field of consciousness, you pick up on things. You pick up on thoughts, intentions, visions, things of that nature. You pick up on that because you're no longer attached to this I. And this also has to do with low barriers, low boundaries. So a lot of psychics, a lot of intuitives, we naturally have low barriers and low boundaries, and we actually have to strengthen those in order to, have a normal day-to-day life without being swept away by others' emotions that we haven't differentiated. So once you move though past that point of development and you're popped out of this I, then you're on the service to other timeline. You're on the service to other frequency where your soul intention, your soul life force becomes about serving others, about giving, about being in that shared exchange because the other is you. right? And it's no different than your own self, than taking care of your own self. So what we see, for example, how this plays out, a good example that I can give you is in the movie Nosso Lar is based on the stories of Chico Xavier, who was a famous Brazilian medium who was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Haven't heard of him? Go check him out if you haven't heard of him. I did a video on him years ago. It might still be on the channel somewhere. There was some kind of a prophecy that he'd done that really aligned with what was happening at the time. So I did a video. But in any case, in this movie, Nasolar, there's a man who dies and he goes to the other side. And it's also called Astral City, I think, in English. And he goes to the other side and he sees what life is like after death. He sees what life is like on the other side. And there he has to go see the mayor of his town. And so he's thinking along human lines and earth lines. And he goes to the mayor and he's wanting to go back to earth to visit because sometimes they're allowed to go back to earth to visit if it's not going to block the earth people's developmental pathway or their own developmental pathway after being in spirit. And so they're very careful about who's allowed to go back and connect with their loved ones through mediums, but some of them are. And so he was going to petition for that for himself to be able to go connect with his loved ones. So he goes to see the mayor, and the mayor drops on his feet, on his knees, kisses this man's feet basically, and says, "We are so happy to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this town. Welcome to here." And he was so surprised because on this side, people that are in power or in positions of authority, they don't do that. You drop down on your knees to someone who's in position of power and authority. And yet we see when we hear and read about angels, for example, we read about all the beings that come from the other side, they drop down to us. And instead of understanding the dynamic and why they actually do that, our little egos think it's because we're so special and we're actually lords of the universe. And but it's not that. So you get into this completely different mindset and perspective once you step on the service to other pathway. And this is what this timeline shift is about. This is what these differing forms of organization and manifestation of things of freedom or control that is happening on the planet is really expressing or digging into is the deeper soul commitment to either the service to self timeline or the service to other. Now, to finish with the timelines, the service to self, it's usually used when we hear about entities that come in to infiltrate and manipulate our timeline and our cycle. And while I do agree that there are entities that absolutely do that and absolutely have a deceptive power over us, which is absolutely deceptive, powerful, and not to be underestimated, yes. At the same time, I have faith in what was given to us and told to us by varying teachers, including Jesus, where it is said that nothing has more power over you than you. Nothing has more power over you than you. And it reminds me of the story of Job in the Bible, where God calls all his sons home and he wants to talk to his sons, and he calls all of them home, and Satan is among them. It says so right in Job, right in the book of Job in the Old Testament. And so Satan walks in, and God's not, "Guards, throw him out of the castle, get him out of here. What's he doing here? Evil enemy, adversary." He doesn't say that. He's like, "Hey, what's up? Where you've been? I see you've come here from roaming the earth. Have you seen my amazing servant Job? Did you see Job, my man?" Yeah, that's how he talks to him. And Satan's like, "The only reason he's like so nice to you, God, is because you give him everything he wants." God's like, "No, not true. Job loves me." Satan's like, no, he doesn't." God's like, "Yes, yes, yes, he does. He does. Go and take just a little bit from him, and that'll prove to me and to you that he's a righteous man." Satan is like, "Say no more. hold my beer. And he's off and he starts testing Job. And so when you dig into like exorcisms, you dig into all of that, this is what consistently seems to come up. Yes, there are infiltrating forces, but only power that they have been definitively given over us, and they are still. And the funny thing is that these forces are not going to deny a God. These forces have absolutely no delusion about the hierarchy, none. And they will not deny God. And they will curse. Yes. They will lie. Yes. So, but all of them, what they ultimately boil down to is that the vast majority, not all of these, but the vast majority of these are purification tests or rituals or energies that are meant to for special beings, to special in air quotes, for certain beings in certain stages of development to really pop up and out of this ego cycle, to be able to release that, to evolve into this what we call service to other timeline. Now, I've really condensed that, and there's a lot more to unpack there. Yes, I know. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to keep this video within certain time limits and stay on topic as well. And but the power, the only power that they have over us is the power of deception. Now, what energy, and you have to stop and think, why would you need the, I mean, some of you have played Dungeons and Dragons or some other kind of a game like that, right? Or read books or watch movies. So, what kind of being works with deception? Usually, it's very weak beings that work with deception. They have to deceive because they don't have the strength, the power, the might to do otherwise. Okay. So it's very important that this kind of sinks in, that yes, there is deception, but no, nothing is more powerful than you, your willpower, your decision, what you envision for your um, manifestation cycle, right? And what you're creating. That power has been removed. It's been taken away from those forces. That power has been given to you and to me and to all others. So it's really about staying strong in that. And yes, occasionally, you have your dark days like my last life, but you bounce back. So, this service to others, service to self timeline is often talked about when it's about these dark entities that are coming in to, bring humanity off track, delude them, and work with them with deception and creating a false reality, which catches us all in. But it's also used to elaborate on the cycle that humanity goes through and is developing through. And the service to self timeline inevitably you get to that point of development with a service to self and it starts looping back on itself, right? And so the self becomes a cage. This concept of self, this idea of self, this limitation of self, this image of self that you have to uphold, it all becomes a kind of a cage out of which it's really hard to break out of. The stronger and stronger that you make that cage, right? So it stops development and it just starts looping. And you can actually devolve on the service to self timeline. The service to other timeline, though, is unlimited expansion, because who's to say this field of consciousness, as you grow, you grow, you grow, you grow, you grow, you grow, you continue growing. And eventually it breaks all the frequencies that are limiting it, that are holding it back. And that's what this timeline shift is really pushing into, because we're having a huge concern around control, um, implementing control, using control to force a kind of growth, to force a direction of growth that we all know is not necessarily needed, and it certainly doesn't make things easier. So why are we doing this, and what is this for? Like what is this for? So we'll start off with the service to self timeline, excuse me, service to self timeline, and which we'll also call control timeline, authoritarian timeline, and harmonic timeline. And what's that about? So the service to self timeline that we're seemingly on. What's that about? Okay. Service to self timeline, control timeline. The card that came up for this control timeline is, or the cards that came up. The first two that came up, and this is from my deck, so if you like it, it's in the description box below this video. But the first card is Symphony. And Symphony I created to illustrate the symphony, the harmony, the frequencies of the universe. And it's actually meaning alignment. It's what are you in alignment to? What are you aligned to? What is the frequency that you're perpetuating? But it's also a call, like hearing the call to return, hearing the call to fall into your place, into your frequency, into your vibration, into your spot, and to heed that call. And the second card is Dawn. And this is a dawning realization. This is awareness, inspiration, realization, recognition. And so, what it's telling me with these two cards right off the bat is that the service to self timeline is there to break people out of the spell that this works because we move so far away in the frequency from what works for us and what is actually good for us until we feel the call, until we have the recognition and the realization that this is not working, this is not good, this is not harmonious, peaceful, this is not what we want. And as cliche as that sounds, our entire lives are cliche, right? This entire experience is cliche because it can't be that hard to get along. And yet we're having the hardest time getting along, right? As humanity. So this seems to be what is coming up and out is that this is a reminder, actually. It's there for us to, out of our own free will, decide that this is not for us. This is not working. It's too painful. It's unsustainable. And so that leads us to wisdom. That's the next card that came up. And that wisdom comes from within. That wisdom is the light that shines from within, that's in the darkness within. And I designed this card because I wanted to show how consciousness like expands outward out of the self and connects with other selves. And so it's an expanding energy. It's also a feminine energy. Wisdom has always been represented as feminine, right? And the feminine is supposed to be the cloak of God, the garment of God, that through which God reveals itself, even though God itself, that manifesting energy, that creative energy, that emanating energy is seen as masculine. The cloak of it, the clothing that it wears is seen as the feminine radiance. So this has always been described as wisdom because wisdom is the visible part of that consciousness. So in the infinite wisdom of God, this timeline is allowed to exist, and we need to be resilient. This is resilience. We need to hang in there. We need to hold on. We need to push through. Okay. So this seems to be a very determined timeline. Let's just put it that way. Let's have a look. The service to self timeline, please, that we seem to be on. What's it about? What can we expect in future? And is this the timeline that is going to assert itself? So the card that fell out is the Emperor. And what comes to mind is where is the head that wears the crown. And the emperor here seems pretty tired. And when we think of authority or authoritative figures, it feels like this is tiring. Our systems of authority are weakening and tiring. What else do we need to know? What else do we need to know? We've got the Queen of Coins. So the Queen of Coins has to do with the economy and the distribution of the economy, right? The distribution of wealth, wealth distribution. I did do a video on that as well about the biggest. This is the biggest wealth heist on and in the history of this planet, and how much we need to pay attention to that is going to be a major problem in the future. Actually, that is in my last live where I spoke about that. And I was telling people to go watch this channel, Gary's Economics, who breaks it down and really explains everything around that. But there's so many others that are speaking about that as well. So pretty much any direction that you go in, we know this is happening, but we're allowing it to happen. And in a sense, it's no better than the medieval ages. And this time in history, people are going to think are very feudalistic and medieval looking back. And we're acting just like the serfs back in the day that were intimidated by their authority figures and intimidated by those in power and intimidated by the rules, laws, and regulations, and didn't realize that these are simply agreements, agreements that have no meaning besides the meaning that we give them. And that we as a whole need to sometimes revise those in a peaceful, healthy way. But certain things cannot carry over. Like we're not living in the same laws that were in existence in 1700 and whatever, because they're not applicable anymore to this time that we're living in. And so what we're living in now is no longer serving us either. And we have to have a look at that. So the biggest pressure, the biggest expression of the consciousness of the entities that we've created, right? So our authoritative entities, our governing bodies, which is expressed through the feminine, which is the economy, in this case, the Queen of Pentacles, or the distribution of wealth, because that's what the Queen of Pentacles does, is she distributes wealth to her kingdom. It's going to reveal itself through that. We're going to see the breakdown or the tiredness, the weariness of this king through this. Okay. What else do we need to know? Else do we need to know? These two stuck out, so I'm going to go with it. We've got the Two of Swords, so this timeline is still going to stay stuck. It's unable to make a clear decision and move forward with clarity, and more voices are going to rise. Page of Wands, but right now they're still in the infancy, like they haven't really gained the traction or the power that they need in order to inspire, channel energy or information that would inspire people and get those changes that we need to make happen rolling. It's still very much in the infancy of things. Service to self timeline, please. The Hermit, people are still going to feel better off by themselves. Um, it's still also what I'm hearing with the Hermit. All of a sudden, I heard this attachment to the image of the old wise man. And it's not to denigrate men, and it's not to denigrate the elderly, but we know that there are difficulties in this cycle also because of how we live together as generations, and that there are like the boomer generation and the Gen Z, I personally believe is one of the biggest generational gaps in the history of humanity are these generations. They are so completely different that it's not even, and yes, we can say, the boomers opened the doors for Gen X, which opened the doors for millennials, and or boomers opened the doors for Gen X and millennials, which opened the doors for Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. but they are so completely different. It's not even funny. And so there's this generational cycle that is coming to an end right now. Like it's so deep on so many levels. But that image that we've been carrying forward with us for such a very long time of this all-knowing father god, of Zeus, of old masculine hierarchy, of old masculine leadership, it's coming to a close. It has to come to an end. It's that image is being dissolved as we speak. But it's a long, slow devolution. What else? This one. Five of Swords. Conflict is brewing on this timeline, this service to self timeline. Conflict is brewing. What else, please? What else do we need to know? And the Seven of Swords, deception. Okay, so there's a lot of deception going on here. And one more. One more for the service to self timeline. One more. We've got the Page of Cups. Page of Cups always to me represents Christianity, right? So it's that innocent sweetness, that innocent sweetness that needs to come into this timeline, because this timeline is not innocent and it's not sweet. It's very cunning, cynical, sophisticated, deceptive, conflict-ridden, um, hierarchical, archontic, of course. And here comes this sweet, innocent, pure energy to remind us, to remind us like a scent on the wind, like walking past jasmine in the evening and just smelling that sweetness and being reminded there's something sweet here too. Like sweetness exists as well. It doesn't have to be this way because we're so entrenched with this is the way it is. This is the way it is. And it's coming in to remind that this is not the way it is. And this is not the only way we need to be. Immediately, I'm thinking of the story of Baldur. I don't know if you guys have heard the story of Baldur, so I'll just really quickly. And it's a Nordic story, and apparently, Odin was married to Frigg, and Frigg was one of the fates of also able to create fate, one of the goddesses that was able to create fate and or spin fate. So they had a son named Baldur, and Baldur was the light of the world, and they loved him above all things. And he was pure, effortless, sweet love. That was all Baldur was. And so Baldur is walking through the earth, and wherever he goes, there's a glow, there's a light. The plants are like, ah. And there's so much love. And Loki gets jealous because that's what Loki does. And so Loki starts plotting against Baldur. And he gets this temporarily blinded, but still um, man to shoot Loki. So here the storyline follows a similar one with Achilles, where Frigg had, to protect Baldur, she had asked all the plants and all the animals and everything in the kingdom to protect him. But there's a river that she bathed him in, and that made him impenetrable to all forms of harm, except for one little spot where there was an oak leaf that stuck on the back of his leg somewhere, and that spot wasn't covered by the water. So that was his one vulnerability. That was his one weak spot. For whatever reason, Loki knew it because Loki is Loki. And so he got this other guy at these games. I'm trying to condense the story, so bear with me. So he got this other guy at these games that were being played to throw a spear at Baldur. And he told where exactly to throw the spear, and nobody expected him to actually hit Baldur, but he hit Baldur. Baldur died, went down to Hell, and Hel is actually a goddess, Hel, and that's probably where the name comes from that we call Hel, because there was this goddess of the underworld in the Nordic mythology named Hel. And so Baldur ends up there, and Odin and Frigg lose their minds, and they are so upset that Baldur died, and they go to Hell. and say, Hell, please, like Baldur is love. He's pure love. We need him on this earth. We need him on this planet. And Hell says, I can't. There are rules to this, and even I can't break the rules. I would love to, but I can't. So the one thing I can do is if the entire world, no exceptions, every voice in the world calls for Baldur to come back, then I'll be able to release him. I'll be able to let him go back into the world, but otherwise I can't. So Odin and Frigg travel all through the world, and every single creature and being and person and entity, they all say, Yes, 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 we want Baldur back. And so they all tell Hel, bring Baldur back, except for one, a giantess. And this was actually Loki in disguise as this giantess. And he refused. She refused. She's like, no, I don't want Baldur back. He can stay down there. And because of that one voice, Baldur is still in hell until Ragnarok and or Armageddon. And then, and only then, will Baldur be released back into the world when everything falls apart. But first, it has to go through this complete collapse of the system, this complete collapse of all the constructs, but also mental constructs, mind constructs, thinking, consciousness, the castles in consciousness that we have built have to kind of break down, come down. We have to build new constructs on this timeline in order for there to be room for this type of energy, in order for this type of energy to be able to even exist on this plane. Because we all want that softness, but nobody's willing to give it, and nobody's willing to be it anymore. And nobody even wants to hear about it anymore. Everybody's like, you know, but we have to make room for this kind of love, and there are certain things that we have to do for it. And we can't just expect it to be there and give all the time and take the hits and take the hits and take the hits. And that means it's love. That's kind of like that abusive partner that expects from us to always take their abuse. Otherwise, we don't love them. Otherwise, we don't care about them. So we have to be willing to create a softness for this softness to exist. And that's why Ragnarok, the entire Armageddon, this entire service to self timeline has to come down. But there is a conflict that is brewing. There's a lot of deception and conflict and things that are happening in the background. And the perfume of Baldur, let's say, still remains in this world. So there's a little bit that is still there. Excuse me. All right, so let's have a look at the service to other timeline, which is simultaneously playing itself out on this earth, on this planet. The service to other timeline, please. And I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. They're both required, they're both needed for whatever stage of development or whatever stage of experiencing. I don't even want to say development, whatever stage of experiencing you're on. So the service to other timeline, please. What is happening there? And we've got the right question. This is interesting. I love this card. This is one of my most favorite cards. On the service to other timeline, we're learning that sometimes it's not about having the solutions right off the bat. And it's not always about having the right answer immediately, but having the right question. Oftentimes, the questions are like keys that open up a series of doors or create a series of portals, one after the other after the other. And we have to learn to ask the right questions as well, and to allow the right information in, and not to dictate what that information is going to be or what that information ought to say, do, act, create for us, but to open the door again to the right questions. Then we're kind of lost. This is another one of my favorite cards. You can actually order a print of this as well. And sometimes it's okay to be lost. I remember one of my guides saying, like when there's a fog out, you don't drive if you can't see. You don't move until the fog clears. And there's a reason for that. For whatever reason, maybe it has to do with you, maybe it doesn't. Remember, we're on the service to other timeline. So not everything is going to be about you or have to do with you, right? So sometimes if it's you're sitting in that fog, you're on that highway, you're on that pathway and the fog is thick and deep and you just stop your car, you pull over, you keep your lights on so people can see the lights, but you decide this is unsafe to drive. It may be frustrating that you feel stuck in that fog and stuck in that loop, but this is not about you. It has nothing to do with you, right? So it's okay to be lost for a second and not take it personally that you're lost and not feel like a failure that you're lost. But okay, there's a fog right now. I can't move. There's not much I can do. And this is not about me. The fog is not a personal a vendetta or affront about me. And remember, we're on the service to other timeline. So again, it's not always going to be about you. Then we have hell. And I made this card because, and I created these cards because I wanted them to be like windows. That's why I didn't have the classic, like this. I wanted it to be broad and I wanted to be like windows and I wanted to create a feeling of overwhelm and being trapped, being stuck, and just this heavy like lava flowing through everything and not being able to move. And I feel like this is the natural development of that lost feeling. So you're in the fog on the road, you're sitting there, you can't move, and now you're starting to feel panicky. The fog's not lifting, and it's slowly moving into this hell state where you're like, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I'm here for. I should have never gotten into my car. I should have never driven today. They told me about the weather warning, but I thought I could make it. I was wrong. And now it starts looping in, and we're back into that service to other self timeline where things start looping in on the self. And someone who's gone to the service to other coming back onto this timeline, it feels like hell. So dealing with this simultaneously is very, very tricky. And then we have gathering. So where you can find strength is in groups of like-minded. Stop isolating ourselves. We need to stop isolating ourselves, those of us on the service to other timeline. But like I said, we're all on in varying aspects on both kind of we're observing both. They're both playing out. And but strictly speaking, like if we were to separate them, the service to other timeline where the higher priority is a togetherness, is a working togetherness, a progressing together, is a recognition that we're all one fabric and just different pinpoints within that fabric. Um, those that are predominantly on that timeline are going to find strength in numbers. You need to find like-minded, okay, and connect with them to get out of that hellish fog state that you may feel trapped in by being trapped in this slow moving transformation of the service to other timeline. So let's dive in to the cards. What do we need to know about the service to other timeline, please? And the first four cards, we've got the hierarchy showing up, this hermit, and we know that this is breaking down, this is coming down, this is coming down. We've got some new these three are interesting, the rest here. So we've got the King of Pentacles. And interesting that the Queen of Pentacles showed up in the service to self timeline. We've got the King of Pentacles here in the service to other timeline. And the King of Pentacles has to do with creating the wealth, creating the money, creating a specific economy. So we're seeing that that is also being worked on. Whereas the Queen of Pentacles, right? She shows it through or expresses the wariness of the emperor through her distribution, because she distributes. The king creates, generates, um, has creating, but the queen distributes. And so here we have the generation, a new thing is happening. And what I'm also seeing is the old is going and the new is rising. There's a new cycle coming up. But the thing is, this could be the energy of moving from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, you know? Like after Caesar, you too, Brutus, after the death of Caesar, which was clearly the marking of the chapter of the end of the book of the Roman Republic, and then it moved into the decadent Roman Empire. Um, this is such a marker as well in these times is the whole structure is not yet coming down. It's still being replaced with something, but it's on its way. And I'd argue that we're still living in the Roman Empire, by the way. I would. I would. It's just changed faces and names over the years, but it went from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire to the Holy Roman Empire to, yeah. So I would say we're kind of still there, and we're seeing this finally we're in the end stages of that concept, of that mindset, of that mental creation. Okay. And we're seeing Lady Death. We're seeing the Nine of Pentacles and Death. So, transformation of what it means to be free, transformation of sovereignty. But there's a certain happiness with this Nine of Pentacles, like sovereign, free, unattached, um, transforming. What else do we need to know, please? Service to other timeline. What else do we need to know? Okay. So we have here on the service to other timeline, we've got victory, Six of Wands. So this will be a successful timeline. The Three of Wands, another victorious card, beautiful outlook. We've got the Page of Wands, and this showed up in the service to self timeline as well. These were the speakers that weren't really ripe yet, that weren't really there yet. And we've got the Ace of Swords, which is a clear decision, a clear idea, a clear inspiration, but also justice. Justice being spoken, and this justice coming from above, because the four aces are infusions of energy on different planes into this realm from higher. The rest of it is what we do with it. The 2 to the 10 is what we do with it, but the ace comes from higher. So with this Ace of Swords, there's an infusion of justice, new thinking, new speaking, new ideas into this realm from higher. There will be new prophets or new speakers that rise. There will be a new vision and outlook, which leads to success, which will be very successful. And we've got here, what I really like here is this Death card. Just the ending even of in a sense, the service to other timeline is realizing that there is no end. There's almost like there's an end to death itself. There is no end. There's only constant transformation, constant transmutation, constant shifting of cycles. And as such, it's just sitting there playing the piano and watching it all play out, Nine of Pentacles, and being somewhat detached to the masses and what's being experienced here. So I feel like the service to other timeline is also playing out so that there's that reminder to the service to others. You don't have to do it this way. You don't have to go through all this. You don't have to loop back in on yourself. and keep sitting in that fog and taking that fog personally, you can do things differently. You can choose to evolve. You can choose to let go of the need even for these kind of limiting structures in order to control, organize, regulate, do all that. So I really feel that this is going to continue because both are, I don't want to say experiments, but experiences of how to deal or cope with certain energies at certain stages of understanding in this experience that we're having here. And in certain stages, this service to self timeline is needed because that timeline opens up the desire to even connect with the divine, to reconnect with God, to go back to God, to recognize that there has to be a different way, to not want to live this separated, hellish experience. And the other timeline is absolutely is the realer timeline, is the realer experience, is the more real experience that we could be living and that we sometimes slip into. So that's what's coming up for me, you guys, with these two timelines that we're moving through and into, and that are moving also through us. And what's a closing message, please? A closing message for the collective that is watching this video and probably wondering, okay, so what do I take from that? What do I take from that? And so what's a closing message? What's a closing message? We've got Knight of Cups, love, 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 love. And don't worry about, just love, just absolute love. And remember to hold that banner up for love. Queen of Wands, be passionate about your love. Okay. Be passionate about your love for life and your love of this experience. And remember that life is not the matrix that we've built to live in. And we keep saying that, we keep calling this mess that we've created life, but life has nothing to do with this at all. Life is not this. These are our structures that we refuse to change. And we act like they've existed forever, but they've only existed the last 80 years. And we can change them just like they were changed 80 years ago. And they were changed before that, and they were changed before that, and before that, and before that. These structures are not for eternity. And the one thing that is for eternity, though, is love. And we have to utilize love and the passion of love to overcome fear, the moon. We have to do it. You guys, thanks for watching. And once again, if you would like a session with me, your personal session with me, and to dive into your opportunities, possibilities, what awaits for you, but also to do your Saturnian initiation chart. If you haven't watched the series on Patreon, head on over there to see what I'm speaking about. You can also book that, but also mediumship sessions. I'm also once again giving. So if you would require a reading in any of those, I'm the person you need to connect with. The link is in the description box below. Take care. Bye.